Hi everyone, I'm Josh and welcome to Josh Wright Piano TV. Today's episode is something that I've been thinking about doing for quite a long time. It's about rebuilding technique. Okay, now this isn't just a general technique rebuild. This is rebuilding a specific skill and some of the steps that go into rebuilding that skill effectively. The core of this video is to not mindlessly drill. You want to bring creativity to your practice. If you are like me, you often think more work equals more results. Better, and that's not always the case. Better work, more creative work yields better results, okay? So you have to think about things in different ways often to break through barriers that are present in your technique. Now, there may be some pianists out there that don't need to rebuild a whole lot of their technique. They're so naturally gifted that they have these skills, but I would say the vast majority of people are not like that. And even the most talented, naturally talented individuals usually work extremely, extremely hard as well. That's a cop-out I find among a lot of people who are jealous of those pianists, as they say, oh, they're just naturally gifted. Of course they have natural gifts. I don't think that someone like Argerich, wasn't born with certain skills, innate skills. But I also know she works extremely hard. She works tirelessly. She's, I believe, in her 80s now, and she's performing as much as ever, it seems like, and it is brilliant playing. Having said that, there are people I've taught that no matter how hard they worked, if they worked 12 hours a day, they won't even come close to her playing level. That's why we don't have, 10,000 Martha Argeriches in the world. She's very special. I think people are born with innate gifts, but I think hard work can also help you overcome a lot of technical challenges. And today I want to give you some steps that I personally try to follow. And I say try because I have to really overcome my OCD perfectionistic mind with some of these steps to rebuild technique. Okay, first of all, change the fingering or organize the passage differently in your mind. Okay, so that's step one. I can't even tell you how many times I've rebuilt something. So for instance, I worked so many years trying to get that to go on 3-1-5-2. When 4-1-5-2 felt a lot better, or 4-2-5-1 was actually the key to unlock that piece for me. That was taught to me by actually a little colleague at University of Michigan. I think she was probably a freshman or sophomore in her undergrad, and I was doing my doctorate, and she played that like the wind. I think it was actually a joke from Logan Skelton. He knew how much I obsessed over that piece, and he knew this girl played it so well. He said, she's going to play it for Josh today in studio class, and I was like, oh my goodness. But I said, okay, how'd you do the opening trill? Because the rest of the piece wasn't too hard for me. And she said, oh, I do an inverted fingering. I was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I worked on it for even just a few weeks, and it started to just loosen up. So sometimes often changing the fingering is the unlocking mechanism to help a student or yourself play something that they couldn't previously play, rather than forcing a particular fingering. The other thing is to organize it differently in your mind. Sometimes that's rhythmically or just thinking in different groups. So if you're playing this, for instance, rather than thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, you can think, and then and then to there, and then to there, and then to there, and then to there. So thinking 1, E and a 2, E and a 3, E and a 4. So you're always thinking across the beat. A lot of times, I see this a lot in Brahms music, especially, thinking across the bar line, and Schumann's music as well. Obviously, Brahms was heavily influenced by Schumann, but their music doesn't always line up in the measures. I think it was Brahms who wrote a letter, maybe it was to Clara, I can't remember. I heard this in some random class, so don't quote me on this. But he said something like, I'm not going to be confined to the bars of the jail that are measures, or something like that. Basically, don't let your music become a prison to each measure. Beautiful sentiment there. So you're always thinking across the bar line, and often just organizing your groups differently. I remember in several lessons, Sergei Babayan would have us think, if we were doing a repetition of something 12 times, he would say, think 4-4-4 or 3-3-3-3, or you could think 8+4, or sometimes 6+3+3. He would have these weird ways of thinking about things that suddenly unlocked something in our minds, and it was just amazing to see how organizing something differently helped to overcome a technical difficulty. Step number 2, set a time limit for your practice on that particular technical weakness each day. If you're like me and some obsessive students that I've had, sometimes you can find yourself wasting away 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes multiple hours, drilling one thing. And actually, you're probably doing more harm than you are good. Actually, I would almost 100% say you're doing more harm than good if you're just practicing one particular skill over and over and over and over. Because if it's not freeing up, you're just ingraining bad tension into that passage. So you need to set a time limit, try to be creative during that time, but usually 5 or 10 minutes a day with a given skill. So if a student's really struggling with an arpeggio, I might have them do little things like this, or groups of 3, and then groups of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All sorts of different rhythms, sorts of different groupings. Sometimes I'll have them work it and we'll get to this in a minute, in different keys. So if you're struggling with a C major arpeggio, you might find that practicing a D major arpeggio unlocks something for you, because that 2 being a little bit higher, I can't even tell you how many times that's been the case with a particularly difficult scale in a piece for me. I'll practice that scale over and over and over again, and sometimes it doesn't loosen up. But then as soon as I start practicing my other scales, it helps a lot. That's actually going to be a little precursor to step number 4, where I'll give some more examples. But set a time limit each day. Be creative during that time, but then let it go. You got to work on your pieces. Yes, you can have technical work each day, but don't let that run hours and hours and hours and not have time for your repertoire, because there are so many students who can whip through their scales up and down, but when they need to apply it to a piece, it's not good, or they have to work on it all over again. They think, if I can play all my scales at 200 or 180 or 160 or 140, depending on where your skill levels are, even 120, you might be an intermediate player. Like, if I could play all my scales 4 notes per click at 120, I'd be set free for all this repertoire I want to play. That can definitely help, but there are so many applications and pieces that are slightly different that you're going to need to work on the actual piece. And we're here to play music. We're not here to be scale robots. Okay, number 3, oscillate to a slow tempo every second or third or fourth time. Okay, so if you're struggling with a particular skill, let's say you're rebuilding jumps. I played this like 12 years ago, but I often use this as my jumps analogy, because it was the first piece that I ever felt like, oh my gosh, I just feel so comfortable with those jumps. Those are the Mendelssohn Serious variations. I have a video called Free Hands and the Up-Down exercise that will also help with that. But let's say that you're rebuilding that. You may want to practice it slowly, once or twice to start out with. And then you can go fast, and then maybe you take a little piece, and then you keep adding onto it. And you get going, but maybe something's not feeling quite right, and you just keep going fast, and stuff starts to fall apart more. It's because you aren't oscillating back to a slow tempo each time. A common thing I see with students is they'll have flying pinkies in their scales, sometimes flying fourth fingers. They'll go, it's hard to demonstrate it. Okay, here we go. They'll go like this. And fingers will fly, rather than keeping it in a nice compact position. And they'll just drill it like with all this extra tension in their hand, rather than going back to square one and really feeling the natural movement of the hand and how it moves and how it rotates and how effortless, that position can be, and this position, and then just isolating those little crosses. Oscillating back to a slow tempo always keeps you in check to make sure extra tension is not setting in. Number 4, we alluded to this earlier, but indirect practicing. I want to demonstrate with something that a student recently brought me. He was playing the fourth ballade for me, and he's a very fine player, really fun student to teach. And he said, I practiced this little passage for like an hour straight. So first of all, he's kind of breaking the time limit rule. I don't think that you're going to suddenly make a breakthrough at minute 52 if you're not making breakthroughs within like the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes tops. You want to set that time limit. But I said, let's go at this from a different way rather than just drilling that over and over again. What if we kind of flipped it 180? So instead of doing white, black, white, white, black, white, like that, you're doing black, white, black, black, white, black. Similarly, like if you're struggling, a lot of students for some reason struggle with F sharp minor, harmonic. If you practice G flat major, and then you just notice the small differences. Okay, yeah, I'm going to start on a 3 instead of a 2. If you want to start on 2, you can, but it's not going to be on the subsequent ones. Okay, but then, I'm just doing this right here. That's pretty comfortable, actually. If I think of that hand angle, and then I just kind of get into position with that. Oh, that's not too bad. If I just think of that little impulse there, and then pretty soon, your scale will start to be set free through indirect practicing. And sometimes you want to practice through all of your scales. Maybe you're struggling with arpeggios. Sometimes practicing like a 7th chord arpeggio, which is much harder than just a basic arpeggio, can be a means of comparative simplicity. So meaning, these are so... I haven't practiced these for probably 20 years. Playing that versus this, like if you were struggling with a basic C major, sometimes doing something slightly more difficult or a little bit indirect, or playing, if you're struggling with C major, for instance, maybe you play C natural minor and you say, okay, a couple of my long fingers are up on the black keys. That feels a lot better. Okay, now let me go back. Okay, that's starting to set free. So indirect practicing can also help. A place where you wouldn't want to change the keys are something like, he was also struggling with this little part, where it goes through all of those crazy chords. You wouldn't want to have to go through and reanalyze like, where am I right now? I wouldn't do it there. But something that has a repetitive pattern that's easy enough to transpose, try some different keys out. You might find something out about your hand by indirectly practicing it using a different topographical set of keys on the keyboard. I hope that helps. So that's step number 4, which is indirect practicing. Step number 5, this is more psychological and meditative, but I want you to think of a hard drive and data being written on that hard drive, or data, however you want to say that. And you have probably, if you are needing a technique rebuild, you have corrupted data. Okay, so there's something going wrong on that spinning hard drive. You, through slow practice, through timed practice like we've been going over, through indirect practice, through oscillating back to your slow tempos, are going to rewrite that faulty data. It's completely overwritten. It doesn't exist anymore. That little image can really help. I know it might sound a little cheesy, but that can psychologically help you. A lot of times we think, but what if I go back to my old way of playing it? It's just so bad. Well, you've rewritten all that data and you have a new set of instructions now. I heard a beautiful quote the other week. It said something like, You have the instructions to help your old self improve. And sometimes we need a new self. We need to rebuild something. You may not have that set of instructions, so you have to rewrite it gradually and slowly and patiently. A lot of things don't always come overnight. Step number 6, this is a fun one that Logan Skelton taught me, and something that I'll probably dedicate a video to at some point. He said you can use symmetrical practice to help rebuild something in your technique. Your strong hand can help you rebuild your weak hand, or vice versa. So I'd say about 90 or 95% of skills are better in my right hand, but there's a few things in my left hand that I can do better. One of them is just descending scales in my left versus ascending scales in my right. So let's take that one, for instance, if we were just taking a basic one like B major. You might think, okay, I'm just going to play like this. But that's really not that helpful, just to play B major going opposite ways, because it's not actually symmetrical. If you look at it, I have a group of 3 notes there, and I have a group of 3 black notes and a group of 2 black notes up here. Okay, well, I need to move my hand up here. Okay, so I'm going to play my B major scale. Uh-oh, well, that one doesn't really work because I have a half step here, and I have a whole step here. Okay, so if I really want to retrain the right hand, I'm going to take that step, that whole step there, half step, whole steps. So I'm doing the 2 black keys and then the 3 black keys. And that has been really helpful. So let's say you're working on this etude, and let's say that opening is giving you the trouble. Well, let's find the symmetrical pattern here. Okay, so I know that I'm on 2 black keys there, so I've got to go to my 2 black keys, and I need to do 2s and then 3s. It might sound silly to do that, but what you can do is you can really analyze the angles of your hand and how each finger is moving. So you might notice that, hey, in my left hand, I notice that I just immediately fall into position with this, whereas in my right hand, I might do that, or I might do that, or I might flare something out, or something might be tense. So doing a mirror image can really help to feel all those little movements. And you can have, and by the way, that was a silly example where my left hand's reteaching my right hand. Most of the time, it's going to be the opposite. Right hand's going to be reteaching left hand. Hopefully I didn't mix those up. I've been recording for quite a while now. Okay, so that's step number 6. Use symmetry to help rebuild the weaker hand. And step number 7 is don't overthink it. I am making this video just as much for my future self as I am any of you. Josh, you can get over this issue, whatever it might be. We all go through difficulties in our technique. We all have things that need to be rebuilt, and a lot of times you need to schedule a break. I can't even tell you how many times, a really apparent example, and it wasn't that I was so stressed about this when I was younger. I learned the wind etude when I was quite young. My teacher purposely gave me a difficult one so that by the time I was hitting the age limit of those junior competitions, it just felt like second nature. So when I was 11 or 12, it probably sounded like this. You know, and then I would let it go while I learned some other pieces, and then I might bring it back for a competition. When I was, 14 or 15, it was maybe without any particular different work, like without rehashing everything in a different way. It just kind of subconsciously started improving. And then by the time I was 17 or 18 or 19, so even though it sounds kind of out there or psychological or meditative or spiritual or whatever you want to call it, let the subconscious do its job. Let it work out a lot of those technical difficulties. Sometimes you might need to sit on a passage slowly for a while, or maybe you need to do it fast in the actual tempo that you're going to be in, but you need to break it down into smaller chunks and then just let those chunks rest. Maybe if you're rebuilding a particular arpeggio or something. I don't know. Maybe you're redoing this. Maybe you just need this. And maybe you need to do just that exercise, what I just did, for a week and nothing else. Don't put it together. Just sit on that until the hand really relaxes, and also your mind and your nerves can relax. And you can say, okay, I got this. This is going to drive me nuts if I do this anymore because my hand feels totally free. Sometimes taking a scheduled break. So if you've worked on something for a week and it's kind of frustrating you, maybe you take a day or two off. If you've worked on something for a month or two, maybe you take a week off. If you've worked on something for a year, maybe you take several months off. And if you've worked on something for a decade, if there is just a skill that you cannot figure out, I would go see a different teacher. A lot of times different teachers can offer different perspectives. If you haven't been practicing differently, obviously change up the practice methods. But if you've been working on something consistently for a really long time, taking a year or two off and working on other pieces, and maybe you incorporate similar figures from those other pieces. So, okay, this particular piece in sixths. I know I'm referencing a lot of Chopin etudes. Maybe you do this one. It's a little different, but that one still deals with a lot of sixths. Or maybe you play the Grand Polonaise. And you work on different things that tackle the same problem, but in different scenarios. And then you come back to it years later. A lot of times that works. I was talking to my wife in the car the other day, and she said, I remember the Prokofiev D minor etude. However, this, I don't know how that goes. I haven't listened to it for years, but I remember she played it a lot. It has a tricky little pattern, and she said, that took me forever to get into my hand. It was just really weird. And she said, sometimes a technical breakthrough can lead to another technical deficiency. Can't even tell you how many times this has happened to me. So she said, I finally got that, and then I was also playing this. And she's like, for some reason, whatever that pattern is, I should have looked it up for this video, but I'm just doing this off the cuff here. So she's like, I couldn't do this. I had to actually rebuild something that didn't have problems before. Don't think that you're getting worse if something becomes corrupted. It doesn't necessarily mean you're getting worse. It means that perhaps there was a set of inputs in your brain for a particular piece that kind of jumbled things up for a different skill. And now you just need to go back and you need to retrain or rebuild that technique. It's not something to freak out about. It's something that's part of this journey that we're all on with piano. So I hope these steps have been helpful. Real quick, just to recap, change the fingering or organize it differently in your mind. Set a time limit each day for working on that particular skill. Oscillate back to a slow tempo every second, third, or fourth time. 4, indirect practicing. So practicing a similar skill, but maybe in a different key or in a different pattern. Number 5, rewrite that data on your mental hard drive. Number 6, symmetry to help the weaker hand by imitating the stronger hand. And then number 7, don't overthink it. Take a scheduled break and actually plan that break. Say, I'm going to work on this for a month, and then I'm going to take a week or two off just to let things settle and let my subconscious rework this. Hope this has been helpful. This is a really difficult topic that a lot of people end up quitting piano over. Do not let it make you want to quit the piano. These are things that can be worked out. Sometimes you just need a different perspective. So if any of you have any questions, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. I hope that if you're getting value out of these videos, that you would help me out by subscribing to the channel, liking it, or sharing it. That helps get the word out to more people. I will leave a few links in the description below. One of them is for a free webinar containing 10 of my favorite tips to help take your playing to a higher level. These are tips I use every day in my teaching and in my own practicing. I'll leave a few links to my paid courses, which go much deeper than this channel goes over. And finally, I will leave a link to my gear kit, all the gear that I use in this studio to film these videos, to record podcasts, and more. Hope that helps. Have a great week. Good luck in your practice sessions.